This is the Baunfire Gaming Podcast, episode 362. I am your host, Morgan, aka Bon Diesel, and this week we'll be talking about Mass Effect's 2025 in 7-day, Grand Theft Auto 6 is getting delayed, Arc Raiders review roundup, and much more. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, leave a review on Spotify or iTunes, and subscribe to the Bon Diesel YouTube channel to get all of my videos, including this one. Let's kick off the gaming news first. The first story will be I'm sick. If you're watching the video, it's obvious. I've got the sick pimple. You're gonna probably hear a bunch of weird cuts in this episode as I cut out my coughs. I'm feeling better today than I was a couple of days ago, but I'm still in the mend. So I'll try not to. I will do my best to not leave any coughs or weird noises in this episode. But I do want to record. I think I've missed like 1 or 2 weeks of this podcast since it started back in 2017, 18, whenever it was. So here we go. Grand Theft Auto 6 has been delayed to November 19th, 2026. It was originally supposed to come out in March of 2026, even though I think that was May. I may have typed that in wrong. Either way, pretty big deal, even though not really unexpected. Especially if you remember the Red Dead Redemption 2 drama. They announced the release date. They actually announced the game, and the release date was supposed to come around pretty quickly, and then they delayed it, and then they delayed it again. It got delayed twice. It's weird. It's hard to judge what this really means. Rockstar in the Grand Theft Auto / Red Dead games are so unique in the industry, where they spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars developing these games, and they're going to make it back. Like they will make it back. Red Dead Redemption 2, I think it's sold like 80 plus million copies or something at this point, just insane numbers. Grand Theft Auto 5, which came out like a decade ago, I want to say it's like over 100 million or like 200 million. It's some stupid number of copies they've sold. They get their money back, and that's what's going to happen with this game, almost no matter what. Like, it's so interesting to be in an industry where, if a game sells 2, 3, 4, 5 million copies, that's a big deal. If it sells 10 million, that's a huge deal. 20 million is like bonkers crazy. Yet the floor for Rockstar is just different. So I'm excited for this game. I actually didn't like Grand Theft Auto 5. I never even finished the story. I found the characters, I understand the characters in the Grand Theft Auto games, the antagonist or the protagonist are supposed to always be like flawed, but I didn't like any of the three. And I hated the switching dynamic. I hated the whole thing of, switching from one character to another, and you could only go so far in the story with one. So, on top of not liking any of them, I hated that you were kind of forced to switch between them. I didn't like the way Grand Theft Auto 5 played. I loved 4. I loved Vice City. I loved 3. I even liked the old top-down ones, Grand Theft Auto 1 and 2. I love the Red Dead games as well, especially 2. I think it's the greatest game ever made to this day. So, I honestly think the biggest impact on this is to the industry. There were absolutely games that could have come out in early 2026 that got pushed to later in the year. And now what do? If you're a game that, your production schedule, like it looked like you could probably come out in early 26, but you wanted to avoid Grand Theft Auto. So you decided to extend out your timeline, maybe release later in the year. Well, now you're in this weird predicament of they are probably going to delay again. Like, I think the chances of this game seeing 2026 are minimal at best. And, so what do? Do you move around your whole release schedule and then they delay again to 27? And now you've, had 2 unforced errors, basically. I don't know. I am certain, though, that there were a bunch of publishers doing all hands meetings here in the last few days to try to decide what to do here. There are some interesting console implications here. They've made it pretty public, I believe, that there's no intent to release on PC day one, so it'll just be Xbox and PlayStation. There's just no way this is going to be on Switch too. And I remember last year when the PS5 Pro came out at its pretty insane price, considering the pretty minimal power jump it had. And so many people, even like quote unquote like Xbox fans, like Ryan McCaffrey at IGN, were like, I figure it's worth buying this because in 2025, when I get to play Grand Theft Auto 6 on it, it'll be the best experience. Then they actually had a release date for 26, and that still felt okay. That was 2-ish years later from the PS5 Pro, and now it's even later. And if the rumors are to be believed about the Xbox next console, whatever it's going to be called, there is a chance that around the same time Grand Theft Auto 6 comes out, the new Xbox would be out, and that would be the best console to play on. It's going to be significantly faster, significantly more impressive, probably significantly more expensive as well than the PS5 Pro, and it's very likely the PS6 is another year or two away, even after this release if it happens in 26. So there is this kind of funny situation where there were people who really justified their purchase of the PS5 Pro, by saying like, well, it's for Grand Theft Auto 6. And then there's a pretty good chance that by the time Grand Theft Auto 6 comes out, it won't even be the premier place to play it. Or it could be. We don't know. I'm really curious. One of my favorite quotes I saw is that, everything is Xbox's fault. I saw multiple people post and being like, well, if they weren't trying to make this thing work on the Series S, it'd be out by now. It's like, that's probably not it. I'm sure that's a challenge. I'm sure that's been an issue for them. But something tells me that is not the primary reason this is happening. And, it kind of doesn't matter to them. They can do this whenever they want. Rockstar and 2K are one of the few publishers and studios who actually kind of have unlimited funds. In theory, you would say like Steam as well. Even, I guess Epic to a point. Not that that's how they treat the industry. And then the other story with Rockstar this week that was, maybe, timed interestingly, is that Rockstar laid off a bunch of people or fired some people. There was a bunch of accusations that they were union busting, that these people were trying to start unions. And I think it was their English studios. And then they, I think, directly came out themselves, or it was Jason Schreier or some somewhat official source came out and was like, actually, those people were leaking information either to the public or to other publishers or whatever. So, I saw a lot of people being skeptical of that. I always make the argument in these kind of situations that the truth almost always lies somewhere in the middle. And, I guess we'll have to wait and see if we ever get more information about that. Next up, we have Mass Effect's 2025 N7 Day and the announcements. If you don't know what this is, it started with fans, but BioWare kind of co-opted it. But for many, many years now, on November 7th every year, Mass Effect fans and now BioWare celebrate N7 Day. So for the most part, it's been a time for new collaborations to be announced, for new maybe some new merch that they post in the BioWare Gear store and things like that. In the recent years, since 2020, it's been a time for them to announce stuff about their next projects. So in 2020, they announced in 2021 the Legendary Edition would come out, which was the remaster of the trilogy. They also teased, I believe for the first time, the next Mass Effect game. They then followed up in 2020 at the Game Awards by showing a trailer that for someone like me who covers the next Mass Effect game pretty closely, has is one of my main sources of information and speculation. It's this nice little 2-minute long trailer that has some great music and some great visuals, and has really kind of set us people anticipating that next game off onto many tangents. Well, this year they did something similar. They had a blog. It was written by Mike Gamble, who's the project director. He's been at BioWare for quite a while. He was involved in Andromeda, as well as some of their earlier games. The main things that we learned from this blog is that they are 100% focused on Mass Effect. We already kind of knew that even back at the beginning of the year when they posted their blog that was, simultaneously saying, hey, we're focused on Mass Effect. That's all we're working on right now. Slash, oh yeah, all those people we loaned out to other studios are now there permanently. It was a soft layoff in some ways. And I believe much of the writing staff was straight up laid off. So we already kind of knew that they were focused on just Mass Effect, but this was kind of just like resubmitting that to the community. He also talked about the Mass Effect TV show. This is going to be on Amazon Prime, and there's been lots of speculation due to call sheets and what they've been doing when they've been looking to recruit actors and actresses and stuff that has suggested that this may have been a retelling of Mass Effect 1. Which a lot of people were. I personally was okay with it because I think that this TV show is a way to onboard people to the Mass Effect universe, where other people didn't like it because they don't want their Shepard story retold. I'm maybe have kind of controversial take that I think Shepard's potential stories are actually pretty limited. I've never considered Shepard to be my character, just a character that BioWare wrote that I get to guide to a point when I'm playing the game. Obviously, people have different takes on that. They have more of like a role play attitude and things like that. All good, no harm, no foul. Just not the way I look at it. So them retelling that story didn't really concern me. Partially because I'm like, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, I'm okay with them setting canon. I have no issue with them setting canon choices in the trilogy, mostly because I think they're going to have to for the next game, but that turns into a different conversation. So TV show won't be retelling Shepard's story. It's going to be a new original story taking place after Mass Effect 3. There was also some insinuation, I guess, that the game will also be taking place after the show. There was some very vague mention of how the show will be kind of a stepping stone from Mass Effect 3 to the show to the next game. What that means for like the time frame and all that, who knows? There's two pretty distinct parties in this conversation amongst Mass Effect fans of whether the next game will take place relatively shortly after the event of Mass Effect 3, where the universe or the galaxy will still be kind of in disarray from the Reaper War. Things will be kind of chaotic and crazy still. Or if the game is going to take place many hundreds of years later, where there may be some more order, but maybe things are kind of starting to ramp up again. Who knows? We don't have any idea at this point. I personally believe the game's going to take place relatively shortly after 3, because everything they've shown us so far, in my opinion, alludes to that, though there have been a handful of things that they've shown where it kind of doesn't fit that timeline. So we'll have to wait and see. And then the last thing they did was in the blog, there were a bunch of italicized letters. It was supposed to lead you to a website that had a kind of a bonus tease, I guess. People struggled so much with making it work that eventually the official Mass Effect account basically posted the answer. And so people looked at it, and what it was a link to a full size, like poster sized image of, it said Civil War at the bottom, and it had a bunch of Krogan in like battle armor fighting. There's a bunch of things that are notable about this. I'll do a way deeper dive in some videos this coming week, as well as my Mass Effect podcast. It's called the Mass Effect Hypecast. So check those out. Long story short, at least my take on it is that, the armor and the equipment and especially the guns in this picture look a lot like the trilogy with some minor cosmetic differences. One of the most notable things is that a bunch of the random Krogan have like legit like helmets on, but their eyes are exposed. So they're not like spacesuits. They're straight up like army, like military uniforms. You also see a couple of the tanks that the Krogan use that we see in, I think it was mostly Mass Effect 3, but 2 as well. And then there's a Varen as well, which they use as like attack dogs. And, some structures in the background that look kind of vaguely like some structures we saw in Mass Effect 2 when we were doing Grunt's loyalty mission. So, we'll have to see what that all leads to and what that means. There were some tweets after the kind of main events, finished up where Mike Gamble, again, the project director, confirmed in a responding to someone, confirming that the Civil War picture that we were seeing was in the future. I assume he means after Mass Effect 3. And then he on his own just tweeted out that every single tease from every single N7 day, all goes together. So I assume that goes all the way back to that 2020 trailer. In 2021, they had, I believe that was the year they had the mass relay with some audio from Liara talking to someone who was masked that we couldn't hear what they were saying. People think it's a Geth. I don't think it is, because for reasons. Again, check out my other content. You'll see deeper dives on that. And then 22, they had a poster of a ship with a Geth-shaped like crater and 4 figures walking toward the crater. So, that had a bunch of little secrets in it. Then 23, we had an actual trailer showing an N7 like agent or soldier. And then 24, we got nothing, and now 25. So, gamble saying in some capacity, all those go together. I will certainly be making a video talking about all of that. So be sure to check out my other content as well. Arc Raiders finally has some reviews on OpenCritic with 25 reviews. It has a score of 91. This is a little surprising to me, if I have to be totally honest. I suspect it'll probably drop until the high 90s or the high 80s, within the next couple of weeks as more of the outlets put in their long-term reviews. And that's not a negative on Arc Raiders. I would rate it probably a solid like 8 out of 10 game. And I think others are probably going to do that too. So you have to keep in mind any rating it gets from now on that's under a 9 is going to drag it down. And I think that's okay. Honestly, 91 feels a bit high. Arc Raiders is an interesting one for me. I like extraction games. I have thousands of hours in Tarkov. Even the kind of precursor games, the battle royales, PUBG, and the Division survival mode, Apex Legends, Warzone, and what was it before Warzone? Blackout. I've enjoyed all those a lot. I play them relatively often, especially I play a ton of Apex and survival back in the day. But this extraction game is a little different, and Tarkov is probably the most high profile one. It's also a really unique game in that it's like really, really punishing and like way overcomplicated. At this point, it looks pretty dated, but it's a game that probably has the best gunplay of any game I've ever played in my life, even though it's got lots and lots of flaws as well. So Arc Raiders has kind of an interesting place in that story. Arc Raiders is a much more casual experience in most ways than a game like Tarkov. Much more simplified, much less complicated, but not in a bad way. It's still very, very good. It's just as punishing in most ways. You die, you lose all the stuff that you have. So if you're, it's a little more forgiving with like certain quests. Say you need to kill so many robots. Just because you don't kill them all in one round doesn't mean you don't make progress. If your teammates kill robots, it counts for you. It's a pretty forgiving game in that way. It is interesting for me. It came out in a weird time where we had Battlefield 6 and their Battle Royale, and the Outer Worlds 2 and Arc Raiders 2 or Arc Raiders kind of all come out in similar windows. And I've been playing Arc Raiders since their first test like 3 years ago. And then I've done the beta test since then. It's improved a ton. Obviously, that first test was extremely rough. It basically wasn't a game at that point. And it's, they've slowly added in features and made it pretty cool. It's a pretty neat game. It hasn't taken as much of my time as I thought it would, though. I fired up to do 2 or 3 runs every day at this point. Those can be 5 minutes long or 20 minutes long. It depends. And I like it. I think it feels great to play. It's very satisfying. There are a few things that are more of a fun rush than hitting the extraction, waiting for the elevator to come, getting on the elevator and extracting. Maybe you've got, strange, raiders in there with you and everyone's saying, don't shoot. Everyone's like trying to be cool, but you never fully trust it, like last night I was on one of the more challenging maps and I had a team of 3 and there was only like 2 minutes left in the map. And so there was only one exit elevator left and I was booking it to it. I had a bunch of robots shooting at me, trying to kill me. I got to the extraction, I hit the button and I got killed. I got put into a down state. But in a down state, you can still get out. You can still hit the button to leave. And so once the elevator got there, I got on, I hit it, and my 2 teammates, even though there was like 15 seconds left, were still nowhere near the extraction. And so I bounced, man. I was out of there. And, the pressure I felt in that moment while I was trying to shoot these drones and fight them off until I knew I'd still be able to get on and extract, it's fun. That's a unique experience that you don't get in other games. So what I've been telling people is that I think me giving a game like an 8 out of 10, whenever I talk about scoring with a game, I'm almost always talking about recommendation. So what level of recommendation would I give? So a 10 out of 10 is a game I'm saying every single gamer needs to play this game with no exceptions. A 9 out of 10, I'm saying almost everyone needs to check that out. Maybe if you genuinely hate this genre, then maybe it won't work for you, but almost everyone else it will. And that's where this feels like an 8 out of 10 to me. This is a game that if you can get into the extraction thing, if you can be patient enough to handle that, bad experiences here and there, you can get a lot of really good experiences out of it. And that's not to mention that the gameplay, I think, is fun. The visuals are gorgeous. The aesthetic of the whole world is neat. I honestly think that the way the skills work and the upgrades of your crafting tables and all that and all the quests, I think, they're not groundbreaking, but they're really good. And I honestly find the PvP to be pretty fun. I'm just kind of shit at it. So, it's, that I have seen calls for people being like Shroud, who's a streamer, has been pretty vocal about like, oh, this game should win Game of the Year over Expedition 33 because stupid single player games always win. Like, mind you, this dude, he's never played Expedition 33. So I don't expect everyone to universally agree that Expedition 33 should be Game of the Year. But I think you should, if you're going to speak out really passionately against it, you should have at least played it. And now his whole thing is, well, if it wins Game of the Year, I'll play it. Well, there's no point in him playing it. One, he should play it before. Like, if he's comparing it now, he should play it now. And two, he's just never going to go into that game with an attitude. He's going to nitpick everything about Expedition 33 because it's not a perfect game. And he's just going to complain and moan and groan about it and be like, see, I was right. This game sucks. Arc Raiders should be Game of the Year. When, like, honestly, the truth is, I think Expedition 33 has a really good chance, but I could make a list of 10 Game of the Year candidates this year, and I would probably still have to leave games off that maybe I don't think it's Game of the Year, but that other people definitely do. Like the Donkey Kong game this year. I, in no way, shape, or form, want to see that game on the Game of the Year nomination list. But I haven't played it, so I'm kind of a hypocrite when I'm talking about Shroud, right? But the reason I don't think I'm a hypocrite is that if I see, Donkey Kong on the top 5, on the nomination list, I'll be like, I don't get it, but I understand. I saw the reaction to that game. People freaking love that game. So, weird situation. I think Arc Raiders is really, really, really great. If you have, I think it's a $40 game as well. It's not even full price. If you have the desire to try something different, you're willing to learn something and be bad at something for a little bit, I think it's at least worth a try. And I honestly think it's only going to get better. There are some minor bugs, there's some performance issues, but for the most part, it runs really well. It's fun to play and it looks really good. That's a good combo in my book. PlayStation had kind of a weird, maybe oopsie this week, where some users on the PlayStation Store noticed that a cross-buy button or kind of insignia had appeared on some games, leading people to go down the spiral of things changing and humans not being good at that. What it seems to suggest, we don't really have any official commentary yet, is that it pretty likely means that PlayStation is going to have their own storefront on PC, and that any games listed with this will, if you buy them on one, you'll have them on the other. So this is something that Xbox has been doing forever, or not forever, but for a long time, where, it's the Play Anywhere program. So if you buy a game for PC and you also have an Xbox in your living room, you can play them both. And if the game supports it, you'll have like cross saves and stuff like that as well. It's a really, really cool system. It is kind of funny that this is a thing that PlayStation will possibly do, mostly because it's kind of another example of, maybe PlayStation, copying what Xbox does, but not getting the same reaction to it, or at least getting praise for it when maybe Xbox didn't really. Just kind of is what it is. When you're the top dog, you get treated different. It reminds me a lot of when Apple will copy Android features. You'll get a feature on your Apple iPhone 2-3 years after Android, but they'll market it, because they're like the best marketers on earth. They'll wrap it in their own little package and be like, hey, look what we did. And they'll get, heaps of praise for it, even though it was a feature on other devices years before that. It's just kind of the way it works. them making their own PC store makes complete sense. They currently use Steam for all of their PC ports, and Steam takes a 30% cut. There is a chance they have a better deal. I don't know if Steam does preferential deals for big publishers or not, where maybe they, only take 25 or 20%. I have no idea. And when I looked it up, I couldn't find anything definitive. So it would make sense though for PlayStation to be like, hey, we're just going to roll out our own store and we'll get 100% of the profit instead of sharing a cut like we do currently with Steam. Now, the other side of that is their games are really hit or miss when it comes to PC. Some of them are really well made PC ports and they sell really well. And some of them aren't. And actually, a lot of them aren't very good PC ports. And many of them don't actually sell that well. I believe personally it's because they take 2-3+ years to release games on PC after the PlayStation. And some, in my opinion, kind of vain attempt to keep that console, like to make sure they're moving units. Now that has obviously worked because they've sold like 80-90 million PlayStation 5s, but kind of at what cost, right? You're talking about loss leading hardware, and you're holding back software being sold on other platforms. And I just wonder if in the long run, those missed sales initially are made up for by having the exclusivity and the platform kind of exclusivity of the console releases. So I don't know. I think this is interesting, and I hope it works out. I think this would be a great feature for other gamers to have. EA is claiming that even after this acquisition likely goes through with the partners they have overseas, they claim that they will keep complete creative control and that there's no plans for layoffs or studio closures. Look, like, it's good for them to say it. In theory, it's good for them to say it so that they have those words out there. And so people can hold them accountable if they end up not keeping true to that. Now, the thing with them going private and not being public anymore is that they can kind of say whatever they want now. And there's very little that anyone can do. If they lied before, if they straight up lied and knew they were lying, they would have issues as a publicly traded company, because like as a publicly traded company, a statement like this would boost your stock market, your stock price, at least a little. And then if they went back and reneged on that, then, that would hurt. And it could be seen as them trying to price fix or manipulate the market or whatever. I don't know. I want to believe them. I want that to be true. And I'll assume it is true until we get proven wrong. I'm just afraid we're going to get proven wrong relatively quickly. I will say this was addressed during the N7 Day blog with Mike Gamble, who's the head of Mass Effect, where he said they, we know you've heard rumors and blah, 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 but we're committed to this and blah, blah, blah. It was just a lot of corpo speak. But again, it was another person in a fairly high level position saying, hey, we're working on this and the plan is to finish it. So I hope that's true. I hope EA stays true to that word, but we'll just have to wait and find out. Speaking of BioWare and EA, Dragon Age The Veilguard won, or has had its 1-year anniversary. This is a game that I still think to this day that it just came out like at the wrong time. Probably came out a few years too late as well. But what really, I think, hurt it in a big way was it just got caught up in probably the most, volatile time of all of the weird, like right-wing, like anti-woke grifters. And I just think that, unfortunately, that ended up, really killing the conversation around it. Now, what is interesting about the Veilguard is that I feel like I know just as many Dragon Age fans who don't like it as, these grifters didn't. And these are people who do genuinely enjoy the series, who did want the game to be good and to love it. And a lot of them just didn't. And for various reasons. They didn't like the way it treated the previous game's canon, previous game characters. Even someone who, played a little bit of Inquisition and nothing else, like, was kind of taken back by the way they treated some existing characters. I thought it was kind of strange, if I have to be honest. But overall, I thought it was a really great game. It was my favorite game last year. And I hate the conversation around it, because even the things that are true, like even if you have legitimate non-grifter opinions on the writing and characters and stuff, I still think overall it was a really good game. And honestly, to this point, I would argue that it has BioWare's best third act of any game they've ever made. But that's probably a bit controversial. The Outer Worlds 2 post-credit thoughts. So I finished the Outer Worlds 2. I did my first playthrough in about 25 hours. And this game is fantastic. I like the gameplay. I like the gunplay. I like the characters. I like the writing. I love the conversation systems. The visuals are kind of hit or miss. It has some really beautiful effects. And the general aesthetic of the world is pretty and kind of neat because it's like almost cartoony, but it's not, it's still somewhat based in reality, to a point. But regardless, I really enjoyed this game. And what I enjoyed so much about it, I think my favorite thing was that it is truly one of the most reactive games I've ever played in my entire life. I would argue it might be more reactive than Baldur's Gate 3, and that is high praise. Just based on, the character that you build, the choices you make, the things that you read or don't, the quests that you do or don't, the people you meet or don't, the things you do to those people or don't, it all matters. It all factors in together, at least in some capacity, or there's at least references to it and stuff as time goes on. It's just so cool. I think it's fair to say that the gameplay in between each of those big conversation moments where you get to flex all that stuff, it's on a 10 out of 10, I don't think. But I honestly thought the gameplay and the way of accessing the world and, using, vents to get from room to room if you couldn't pry open the door because you weren't strong enough or didn't have a high enough engineering score, stuff like that. Things I didn't interact with basically at all were like the stealth system and some of the other systems. But that just makes me realize that like if you did a whole second playthrough and played it completely different, you can. And you could probably get significantly different results. And that's just really cool. I remember this game caught some crap from people being like, oh, this was supposed to be the $80 game. And then they lowered the price to 70 like everything else. It would have been worth it to me. I mean, I think you could easily get 100 hours out of this game. In a single playthrough, you could probably do at least 50, if not more, if you really went all in and did everything in the game, where I probably skipped a third of the content. That's kind of how I am with my first playthroughs. So Outer Worlds 2, fantastic. If you're into Western RPGs at all, I think it's worth playing. Even if you're curious about them, especially if you have Game Pass, please check out the Outer Worlds 2. And the last story for this week, the USA drops tariffs with China to pre-April levels. Great, cool. Unfortunately, the damage has been done, and I will not sit here and pretend to be an economist or an expert on manufacturing or anything. But just from following the story relatively closely, knowing that, Xbox raised the prices on their 5-year-old consoles that aren't really selling that well already because of tariffs, because they don't keep a bunch of stock on hand in the United States. And, like PlayStation likely had millions and millions of consoles on hand before the tariffs came through. So they either didn't have to be as aggressive with their price jumps or could hold off on them longer. Xbox kind of seems like they're hanging by a thread when it comes to hardware, that they very likely aren't stocking up hardware anywhere. They're just making as much as they think they're going to sell. And the problem with that with the tariffs was that if they're manufacturing them right now to be sold next week, when they come in, they're going to get tariffed. Where, if they were like some of the other companies that likely stockpiled consoles here in the States before they released or before they announced them, that it was just better for them. So it made sense why they didn't have to make maybe similarly drastic cuts and price jumps. I don't think we're going to see prices go down, even if this tariff, the tariffs being dropped stays, or at least return to old levels. I wish it would. I wish Xbox would be like, hey guys, JK, we're moving everything back down to their original price. Or let's get really crazy, move it down to a discount. Because 5 years later, you shouldn't be paying $600, $650 for a Series X when I paid $500 for it 5 years ago. And that's a conversation about all of the platforms, about almost everything right now. So I wish this meant that things were going to get better. Maybe it means that the next gen consoles, if they're able to import them under these more fair numbers, that they will not be as expensive as people thought they were going to be. But if you're expecting to see the Rogue Ally X, the ROG Xbox Ally X, or or the Series X or S drop in price due to the tariffs, I don't know. I doubt it. You know, maybe if they sell through all the stock that got tariffed and they start bringing in new hardware that isn't being tariffed, maybe they can drop the price again for that. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. For content updates, I have a bunch of N7 Day coverage. I've already put out one video just kind of summarizing what happened on N7 Day for Mass Effect. I will record a new Hypecast episode. That's my Mass Effect Hypecast, the other podcast I run. And I'll be making videos about specific topics, like how all of the different N7 Days fit together. Maybe doing a more of a deep dive on that Krogan poster, and just kind of talking about how what we learned has kind of impacted what I'm expecting from the next game, how far away it is, and things like that. I also will likely be on, assuming I'm feeling better in a couple days, this coming week, I should be recording an episode of the Lorecast, the Mass Effect Lorecast, with N7 Legend and some other folks. So be on the lookout for that. And that is where we will wrap it up. Thank you for listening to this episode, and thank you to everyone who supports as YouTube members and or Twitch subscribers. If you're interested in supporting this podcast and all of my other content, please check out the links in the show description. If you have questions or feedback, hit me up on social media at Bondiesel or at the Baunfire. Join my Discord in the Linktree link down in the episode description, or comment on Spotify or YouTube. If you comment on there, I'll respond. Almost no one does it, so you will have my full attention. That is all I have for this episode of the Baunfire Gaming Podcast. So until next time.